The hospital smelled of bleach and despair, a sterile kind of sadness that clung to the air like damp fog. At 5:47 a.m., before the sun even thought about rising, Marcus Green pushed his mop across the linoleum floor of St. Augustine Medical Center. His hands, calloused and cracked from years of gripping brooms and scrubbing floors, moved with a rhythm born of habit. At 28, Marcus was a shadow in this place, a janitor who blended into the walls unnoticed by the doctors in their crisp white coats or the patients clutching their charts. His uniform, a faded navy jumpsuit, hung loose on his lean frame, and his sneakers, worn thin at the soles, squeaked faintly with each step. Marcus didn't mind the work. It was honest. It paid for the tiny apartment he shared with his younger sister Aisha, who was 16 and dreamed of becoming a nurse. Every night he'd come home to find her hunched over biology textbooks, her pencil scratching furiously as she memorized terms like mitochondria and ventricles. Those books weren't cheap. Neither was the rent or the groceries or the bus pass she needed to get to school. So Marcus worked doubles, sometimes triples, mopping floors, emptying trash, and wiping down surfaces no one else thought about. As long as Aisha had what she needed, the weight of the world on his shoulders felt bearable. But St. Augustine wasn't kind to people like Marcus. The hospital was a microcosm of the city, a place where status mattered more than character. Doctors strode past him without a glance, their voices sharp with authority as they discussed cases over coffee. Nurses, overworked and underpaid, sometimes snapped at him to hurry up when he was cleaning a room. Patients, too, barely registered his presence, their eyes fixed on the ceiling or their phones, as if acknowledging him might make their own fragility more real. Once a surgeon had tossed a crumpled coffee cup at Marcus, mistaking him for a trash can. "Keep up, man," the surgeon had muttered, not even looking back. Marcus had picked up the cup, tossed it in the bin, and kept mopping. The whispers were the worst. "Why's he still here?" a nurse had said once, thinking Marcus couldn't hear. "Guys like him don't last long." She wasn't wrong about the turnover. Janitors came and went, worn down by the hours or the invisibility. But Marcus stayed. Not because he loved the job, but because Aisha's dreams were bigger than his own. He'd promised their mother before she passed that he'd take care of her, and Marcus Green didn't break promises. That morning, something felt different. The hospital was quieter than usual, the usual bustle of the ER replaced by an eerie calm. Marcus was cleaning the third-floor hallway when he noticed her, a woman sitting alone on a bench near the elevator. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled into a loose bun. Her coat, a faded green wool thing, hung off her thin shoulders, and her hands trembled as she clutched a small leather bag. She looked out of place, like someone who'd wandered into the wrong building and didn't know how to leave. People passed her without a second glance. A doctor hurried by, his eyes glued to his tablet. A nurse pushed a cart of supplies, her earbuds blasting music. Even a security guard stationed at the end of the hall barely looked up from his phone. But Marcus stopped. Something about the woman's eyes, wide-searching, almost lost, caught him. He set his mop against the wall and walked over. "Ma'am," he said softly, crouching to meet her gaze. "You okay? You need help finding someone." She looked at him, her eyes glassy but sharp, like she was seeing him and the world behind him all at once. I'm waiting," she said, her voice fragile but clear. "For someone important." Marcus nodded, not pressing her. "All right, you've been here long. It's cold by this elevator." She shook her head, her fingers tightening around her bag. "Not too long. But no one stops." Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with something heavier, like disappointment in the world itself. Marcus glanced around. The hallway was empty now, the hospital waking up slowly. He could have walked away, gone back to his mop. His supervisor, Mr. Callahan, was a stickler for schedules, and Marcus was already behind. But he stayed. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She blinked, surprised, then nodded. Marcus sat on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. He didn't say much, just let the silence settle. Sometimes he'd learned silence was what people needed most. After a moment, she spoke again. "You're kind," she said almost to herself. "Not many are." Marcus shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Just doing what feels right, ma'am." They sat there for nearly 20 minutes, Marcus occasionally asking gentle questions: did she need water, a blanket, someone to call? She answered vaguely, her words drifting like leaves on a river. But there was something about her, a quiet dignity, a strength beneath the frailty that made Marcus stay. When she finally stood, her knees wobbling, he offered his arm. She took it, her grip surprisingly firm. As they walked toward the elevator, she paused, her eyes locking onto his. "People like you," she said, her voice steady. "Now you're the ones who keep the world turning. Don't ever forget that." Marcus didn't know what to say. Her words felt like a weight and a gift all at once. He nodded, helping her into the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of something, a glint of gold on her finger, a ring with an intricate crest. It looked expensive, out of place on her weathered hand. He shook his head, brushing off the thought. Probably just a family heirloom, he told himself. But as he returned to his mop, her words echoed in his mind. He didn't understand them yet, but something told him he would. Marcus couldn't shake the woman's words as he pushed his mop down the hallway. The hospital was waking up now, the hum of activity filling the air, doctors barking orders, carts rattling, phones ringing. But her voice lingered, soft yet heavy, like a stone smoothed by a river. He didn't know why he'd stayed with her so long. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him, like she saw more than a janitor in a faded jumpsuit. Or maybe it was just instinct, the same instinct that made him check on Aisha when she was too quiet, or slip an extra $1 into the tip jar for a coworker who'd had a rough day. By noon, Marcus was back on the 3rd floor, restocking cleaning supplies in a closet, when he saw her again. She was in the cafeteria this time, sitting alone at a corner table, her leather bag resting on the chair beside her. The tray in front of her held an untouched cup of tea, the steam long gone. She stared out the window, her expression distant, like she was searching for something in the gray city skyline. Marcus hesitated. He was already behind on his rounds, and Mr. Callahan had given him a pointed look earlier about efficiency, but something pulled him toward her. He grabbed a bottle of water from the vending machine using the last of his break money and walked over. "Thought you might want this," he said, setting the bottle down gently. "Tea gets cold fast around here." She looked up, startled, then smiled, a small, genuine thing that made her eyes crinkle. "You again?" she said, her voice warmer now. "You don't give up, do you?" Marcus chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Guess not, ma'am, just checking in." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, please, I could use the company." He glanced at the clock. He'd catch hell for this later, but he sat anyway. They talked for a while, or rather she talked, and Marcus listened. Her name was Eleanor, she said, and she used to come to this hospital years ago. Not as a patient, she added quickly, her fingers brushing the gold ring on her hand. "My husband, he was here for a long time." Her voice faltered, and Marcus noticed the way her thumb rubbed the ring like it was anchoring her to something. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice low. He didn't push for details. He knew grief when he saw it. It was in the way Aisha sometimes stared at their mother's old scarf, or the way his own chest tightened when he passed her favorite diner. Eleanor shook her head. "It was a long time ago, but this place, it brings it all back." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "You remind me of him. Not in looks, but in heart. He'd sit with anyone, talk to anyone. Didn't matter who they were." Marcus shifted, uncomfortable with the comparison. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am." "No," she said firmly, leaning forward. "You're doing more than that. You see people, most don't." Her words hit him harder than he expected, and he looked away, his eyes landing on her bag. It was old, but the leather was high quality, embossed with a faint crest that matched her ring. He didn't know much about brands, but it looked expensive, like something you'd see in a fancy store downtown. He brushed the thought aside. Probably a gift, he told himself. People held on to things like that. Their conversation was cut short by a commotion at the cafeteria entrance. A group of nurses stood there whispering and pointing. One of them, a woman named Karen, who'd never bothered to learn Marcus's name, called out, "Yo, janitor table, by the window's a mess." "You gonna do your job or what?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he stood ready to move. Eleanor's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "Stay," she said, her voice sharp. "They can wait." Karen laughed loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear. "Oh, come on, lady. He's got work to do. Don't waste his time." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Marcus saw something fierce in her, a spark that didn't match her frail appearance. "Young lady," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You might want to reconsider how you speak to people." Karen's smirk faltered, but she shrugged and walked away, muttering under her breath. Marcus sat back down, his heart pounding. He wasn't used to anyone standing up for him. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Eleanor's expression softened. "Yes, I did. You deserve better." They talked for another half hour, Marcus forgetting about his rounds entirely. Eleanor shared bits of her life stories of traveling the world, of late-night conversations with her husband about medicine and ethics. She spoke with a precision that surprised him, dropping terms like Hippocratic Oath and double-blind studies like they were second nature. Marcus listened, nodding, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than she was letting on. As they parted ways, Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She scribbled something, tore out the page, and handed it to him. "My number," she said, "in case you ever need to talk." Marcus took the paper, his fingers brushing against hers. As he did, a business card slipped out of her bag, landing on the table. He caught a glimpse of it before she quickly tucked it away, a silver card with embossed text, "Eleanor V. Hamilton, Chief of Surgery, Ret." The hospital's logo was stamped beside it. His breath caught. "Chief of Surgery." He looked at her, but she was already standing, her face unreadable. "Take care, Marcus," she said, and walked toward the exit, her steps slow but steady. He stood there, the card's image burned into his mind. Eleanor V. Hamilton. The name sounded familiar, like something he'd heard in passing. But it couldn't be. Could it? Marcus couldn't focus on his work for the rest of the day. The business card's words, "Eleanor V. Hamilton, Chief of Surgery, Ret," kept looping in his mind. He'd heard the name before, hadn't he? Maybe in passing during one of Aisha's rants about medical pioneers. Dr. Eleanor Hamilton, the first woman to lead St. Augustine's surgical department, a legend in the field. But that couldn't be her. The woman he'd sat with was just Eleanor. A lonely widow in a worn coat, clutching a bag like it was her lifeline. He shook his head, scrubbing a stubborn stain off a bathroom floor. He was imagining things. People like Dr. Hamilton didn't sit alone in hospital cafeterias, ignored by everyone. They didn't need people like him to keep them company. But the ring, the bag, the way she spoke with that quiet authority, it nagged at him like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. By the time his shift ended at 7 p.m., Marcus was exhausted, but he couldn't go home. Not yet. He needed answers. He found her in the hospital's main lobby, standing by the glass doors, staring out at the evening rain. A black car idled outside its driver, holding an umbrella. Marcus approached cautiously, his heart pounding. "Eleanor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her face lighting up. "Marcus, I was hoping you'd come." He swallowed, clutching the piece of paper with her number in his pocket. "I saw the card," he blurted out. "In the cafeteria. It said, Chief of Surgery." Her eyes softened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she gestured toward the car. "Walk with me." They stepped outside, the driver holding the umbrella over them. The rain pattered softly, and Marcus felt like he was in a dream. She stopped by the car, turning to face him. "Yes, Marcus. I'm Eleanor Hamilton. I was the chief of surgery here for 20 years. Retired 5 years ago after my husband passed." Marcus's mouth went dry. "But why didn't you say anything? You were just sitting there and no one—" He trailed off, his mind racing. "No one knew." She sighed, her breath visible in the cold air. "I didn't want them to know. Sometimes I come back here to remember, to feel connected. But people see what they expect to see. An old woman in a shabby coat, I'm invisible to them, just like you are." Marcus flinched at her words. Invisible. He'd felt that way his whole life, but hearing it from her, a woman who'd once commanded this hospital, hit differently. "You're not invisible," he said, his voice firm. "Not to me." Her smile was sad but warm. "And that's why you're different, Marcus." Before he could respond, a man in a suit approached, his face serious. "Dr. Hamilton," he said, bowing slightly. "The board is ready for you." Marcus's eyes widened. "The board." She nodded at the man, then turned back to Marcus. "I have a meeting, a hospital board review. They're deciding on some funding issues, and they asked for my input. But I'd like you to come with me tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." He nodded, dazed, as she climbed into the car. The driver closed the door and the car pulled away, leaving Marcus standing in the rain. He didn't feel the cold. All he could think about was her words, her title, and the fact that she'd chosen him to see something important. The next day, Marcus arrived at the hospital early, his stomach in knots. He'd barely slept, replaying every moment with Eleanor. Aisha had noticed his distraction, teasing him about daydreaming on the job. He hadn't told her yet. He wasn't sure how to explain it. Eleanor was waiting for him in the lobby, dressed in a sharp blazer and skirt, her leather bag replaced by a sleek briefcase. She looked every bit the part of Dr. Hamilton now, but her smile was the same. "Ready?" she asked. They took the elevator to the top floor where the boardroom was. Marcus felt out of place in his jumpsuit, but Eleanor's steady presence kept him grounded. Inside, a dozen people in suits sat around a long table, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion as Eleanor introduced him. "This is Marcus Green," she said, her voice commanding the room. "He's the reason I'm here today." The room went silent. Marcus's heart raced as Eleanor continued. "Yesterday I sat in this hospital for hours, alone. No one noticed me, no one cared, except this young man." She gestured to Marcus, her eyes fierce. He stopped. He listened. "He treated me like a person, not a problem. That's the kind of heart this hospital needs." Marcus's face burned. He wanted to disappear, but Eleanor's hand on his shoulder kept him steady. The board members shifted uncomfortably, especially Mr. Callahan, who was there representing the staff. Dr. Hamilton Callahan said, his voice tight, "We appreciate your input, but nothing." She cut him off. "You've overlooked people like Marcus for too long. He's worth more than half this room combined." The room erupted in murmurs, but Eleanor wasn't done. She pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "I'm funding a new scholarship program for hospital staff, starting with Marcus. Full tuition any program he chooses. Because I believe in people who believe in others." Marcus's knees nearly gave out. A scholarship, he couldn't process it. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "You don't have to say anything," Eleanor said softly. "Just keep being you." As they left the boardroom, Marcus caught Callahan's eye. The man looked away, his face red. For the first time, Marcus felt seen, not just by Eleanor, but by everyone in that room. Marcus stood in the hospital parking lot, the evening air cool against his skin. It had been a week since the boardroom meeting, and his life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. The scholarship papers sat on the kitchen table at home next to Aisha's biology books. She'd screamed when he told her, throwing her arms around him so tightly he could barely breathe. "You're gonna be somebody, Marcus," she'd said, her eyes shining. He'd laughed, but the truth was he was still processing it all. Eleanor had called him that morning, asking him to meet her at the hospital. She'd been vague about why, but her voice had that same quiet strength that made him trust her. When he arrived, she was waiting by the main entrance, her green coat replaced by a tailored navy one. She looked like the Dr. Hamilton he now knew her to be, but her smile was still warm, still human. "Walk with me," she said, leading him through the hospital's main corridor. People nodded at her now, their eyes wide with recognition. A few even stopped to shake her hand, calling her doctor or ma'am. Marcus noticed the difference immediately. No one ignored her anymore. And for the first time, they didn't ignore him either. A nurse he'd worked with for years, Karen, gave him a sheepish nod. Mr. Callahan, passing by with a clipboard, avoided his gaze entirely. They stopped at a small conference room where a group of young staff members, janitors, aides, cafeteria workers sat waiting. Eleanor gestured for Marcus to sit at the head of the table. "These are the first recipients of the Hamilton Scholarship," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years in charge. "And you, Marcus, are the reason it exists." He stared at her, his throat tight. "Me." She nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You showed me what this hospital was missing. Heart, compassion. The kind of strength that doesn't need a title. I've spent my career saving lives, Marcus, but you reminded me what it means to live." The room was silent, every eye on him. He felt exposed, but not in the way he used to. This wasn't the invisibility he'd known his whole life. This was something else, something bigger. He cleared his throat, forcing the words out. "I just did what felt right. And that's enough," Eleanor said. "More than enough." She went on to explain the scholarship full tuition for any program plus mentorship and job placement. The others in the room, people like Marcus who'd spent their days cleaning, serving, and being overlooked, listened with wide eyes. One woman, a cafeteria worker named Maria, wiped away tears. Marcus knew her. She'd once shared her lunch with him when he'd forgotten his. Now she was getting a chance to become a nurse just like Aisha wanted to be. After the meeting, Eleanor pulled Marcus aside. "I have one more thing for you," she said, handing him a small envelope. Inside was a key and an address. "It's a small apartment near the university. For you and Aisha. No more long bus rides." Marcus's hands shook as he held the key. "I can't. This is too much." "No," she said firmly. "It's not enough. You gave me something I'd lost, Marcus. Hope. You didn't just help an old woman, you helped me remember why I became a doctor. This is my way of saying thank you." He wanted to argue, to say he didn't deserve it, but her eyes stopped him. They were steady, unwavering, like she saw right through him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. As they walked back to the lobby, Marcus thought about the past. The days spent mopping floors, ignored by doctors and nurses. The nights he'd come home exhausted only to find Aisha studying by a flickering lamp. The times he'd felt like nothing more than a shadow. Now he stood taller, his shoulders straighter. People nodded at him as they passed, their eyes lingering with something new respect. Outside, Eleanor stopped by the same bench where they'd first met. She sat patting the space beside her. Marcus joined her, the silence comfortable. "You're going to do great things," she said, her voice soft but certain. "Not because of the scholarship or the apartment or anything I've given you, but because of who you are." He looked out at the city, the lights twinkling in the dusk. For the first time, he felt like he belonged in it, not as a janitor, not as a shadow, but as Marcus Green, someone who mattered. As they parted ways, Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. "Kindness doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives. Quietly, one soul at a time." He walked toward the bus stop, the key in his pocket, a new path ahead of him. The world didn't feel so heavy anymore, and for the first time he knew it never would again.